My name is Vince Kordak, National Park Ranger in the Charlestown District of Boston National Historical Park, the Navy Yard Chain Forge, Building 105. Visitors to the Navy Yard today only see naval warships like USS Cass and Young, but behind any and every naval warship would have been an industrial establishment, including this facility, which made all the anchor chain for U.S. Navy warships for nearly 3/4 of a century. Once the Navy Yard closed in 1974, management of this building was transferred jointly to the National Park Service and the Boston Redevelopment Authority. Management, in terms of the cleanup of the building in recent years of hazardous materials, painting and cleaning of the myriad industrial equipment in here, was done in part under the auspices of the National Park Service. As the name suggests, the primary function of the chain forge was to make anchor chain for the U.S. Navy's warships and other vessels. Anchor chain such as these. The links in front of you are 3/4-inch anchor chain for the Navy's submarines and landing craft, such as landing ship tanks, both of which were raided in the Navy Yard during World War II. But the links themselves would get progressively larger, and the links being made in this chain forge for the 4 3/4-inch die lock would far exceed the size and weight of the links in my hand. Behind me would be the location of the beginning of the process for making die lock chain. Bar stock would be offloaded from railroad flatbed cars and brought into the chain forge at this ramp location. Much of the stock would be sheared off in the shearing machines here for use in the other production of smaller anchor chain. The largest stock, 4 3/4 die lock, that bar stock would have been moved down the ramp and moved into its own separate production line because the weight of that material was so much larger. The first step in bringing the bar stock in would be to cut it to the appropriate lengths. That would occur on the various cutting machines, one of which you see behind me here. Stock would then be heated to 2100 degrees Fahrenheit inside the oil-burning furnaces in preparation for bending the rod stock into a shank or stem section of anchor chain. In the making of chain, 3 types of pressure or forging could be used: mechanical, heat, and pressure. All 3 were employed by the chain forge. In the production of the largest chain, however, the 4 3/4-inch die lock, primarily pressure and heat are used. The production line continues through here, where the various steel nickel alloy rod be then heated, cut, and then bent here in the forge press machine. Bending of the chain rods is very important. This has been because the chain would have to be made into a stem or socket section of chain. This refers to the ending of the chain. Again, using the 3/4-inch chain, this would be a stem section of chain. The end is machine tooled to produce the spherical tempered end. This would then be, in the process of making die lock, attached to a socket section of chain that would insert itself on top of the stem section of chain. To do that requires a combination of heat and pressure, and to be precise, a lot of heat and a lot of pressure. In the production of anchor chain, it was critical to first heat the various stem and socket sections of chain before hammering them together. This would be done in oil furnaces such as the ones behind me. You will notice that these were made out of brick and are built on steel framing well off the floor because of the tremendous heat generated. Each one of these oil forges was capable of heating steel to 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll notice the smaller opening of this one compared with the larger opening of the 2 to my right. This indicates the increased size of the links of anchor chain that would have to be made and heated. The production forges here were installed in the 1950s in preparation for making the 4 3/4 die lock, which was not made in this chain forge until the beginning of the 1950s. The Navy's new supercarriers, this separate production line was set up for the exclusive making of the largest anchor chain. Above us was installed at that time an electric monorail. This was needed to allow for the movement of shots of chain. Shots of chain refer to the fact that anchor chain is measured out in specific lengths called shots. One shot of chain would be 90 feet long. Each link in a shot would weigh 360 pounds. An entire single shot of chain would weigh approximately 16 tons. Hence, the monorail was necessary to hold the ever-increasing lengths of chain being made to produce one shot. Behind me would be a combination of oil burning furnaces and the largest drop hammer in the chain forge, which is capable of hitting a link of chain with 25,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. Behind me stands the largest drop hammer in the chain forge. This one was specifically manufactured for this site in the early 1950s by the Erie Industrial Company in Erie, Pennsylvania. It was capable of dropping on a link of chain with 25,000 pounds of pressure. Each link of chain would be put together, stem and socket section together under the drop hammer here, would be dropped 7 times. They would then pull the link out on the monorail and move it to the largest furnace on the production line. You will notice that the opening on these furnaces is much larger than the ones that we showed you earlier, because as the links of chain become attached and are larger, they must have a larger space to be heated in. They would then reheat the chain and then move it via the monorail back under the hammer, where it would be flipped around and the hammer would drop again 7 more times. They would repeat that process twice, and then if one were to cut the stem and socket sections of the now forged links of chain, it would be impossible to tell the two apart. Behind me, you can see raised corrugated doors, each one of which can be raised. The massive heat generated by the furnaces in here was mitigated somewhat by opening these up during the day when chain was being produced. The end result of all the production work that occurred here at the chain forge was the manufacturing of large amounts of die-lock chain for the Navy. With me today is Chief of Visitor Services and Interpretation Bill Foley, my boss, and in front of us is a small section of 2-inch die-lock chain which was used on Fletcher-class destroyers, of which USS Castle Young, our museum ship at the Charlestown Navy Yard today, is one. Bill, if you could help me pick up this section of chain. Keep in mind that this section of chain does not even weigh 1/3 of what 1 link of 4 3/4 die-lock chain would weigh. That illustrates the great weight of chain made here at the Navy Yard. In the course of 60 years, the Navy Yard produced over 6 million pounds of die-lock anchor chain for the Navy's ships.